What is up, guys? Gabe here on the Jason Khalipa Podcast, and I am alone today. Solo episode. I think this is a first on the Jason Khalipa Podcast, but Jason's traveling, is in Vegas. He had his Train Hard Men's Club. I just saw the picture go up on social media. Looked like a really good turnout, really good crew. The guy's busy getting the boys together, getting some cool workouts in. You know, the Train Hard Men's Club has turned into something so cool. And Jason's obviously super passionate about it, super passionate about what he's, turned that into in his local community. And he's been traveling, doing it as he kind of hits the road with family. And today was the Vegas one, so he couldn't make it back. So I'm doing a solo episode. I asked for a whole bunch of questions. And before anything, though, because I know Jason listens to these episodes, he goes back, he listens to all of them, and he's definitely listening to this one because he wasn't on it. Wants to make sure I didn't say anything crazy. But, I really appreciate Jason because he's given me, since I started with NC Fit back in the day, he's always given me a lot of trust. He's always like letting me take the rein on things and try things, sometimes fail things. So without getting too sappy, Jason, because I know you're listening, appreciate you for giving me the trust here. I know that it's a big deal to be solo on the Jason Khalipa Podcast, even though Jason's not on. So thank you, Jason. But put up a sticker yesterday on social media for a bunch of questions. So most of the time I'm going to spend here is answering questions. Hopefully it's a really good episode, provide some answers to the burning questions people have, and we can have some fun with it. I also have some random thoughts that I can share. But let's start with, we want to hear about the Team USA days, Gabe. So a lot of people don't know this about me. I've talked about it a little bit on the podcast, but there was a time way back when, before I got into CrossFit, this was back in like 2013. It's crazy to think that that's over 10 years ago now, that I got super into triathlons. I swam all through college. That was kind of like the only sport I really knew or did. I wish I would have done more team sports. That's something we've talked about on the podcast, and something that I definitely look forward to being involved with Shay now with my kid. I never got to play Little League, never got to play baseball, never got to play team sports. And while I hope that yearning for me not having that doesn't mean that I force my kid into those things. I really just hope that he enjoys it and wants to do it. I was a swimmer, so did an individual sport all growing up through high school, through college. And that led me to do triathlons right after college and was pretty good at it. I raced the Olympic distance, which was just under a mile swim, a 24.6 mile bike, and a 10K, so a 6.2 mile run. And I got really good at that distance. I qualified for nationals, age group nationals. So again, I'll caveat all this with, age group nationals and world, which is where I competed at, is a much kind of lower level of competition than pro nationals or pro worlds, obviously. So while it's very cool, and I definitely had, a good amount of success in the sport, it was at the age group level, which is, very much not the level of Jason competing at the CrossFit Games, for example. But it was super fun. And one of the coolest experiences I've ever had in my life was when, I had a really good race at the national race for this distance. And so the way it worked is you qualified for nationals if you pretty much at any USA Triathlon sanctioned event, if you were in the top 5% of your age group, you would go to nationals. And I remember the race that I qualified at was in Burlington. No, not Burlington. It was in Vermont. But anyway, what was notable about the time that I qualified was that it was an incredibly windy day, and the water was very, very choppy. So it was a brutal swim. And if anyone is in any way into the triathlon world, has done triathlons, or knows a triathlete, the biggest thing is that it's a lot of people that are runners or cyclists, but I would say that the minority are people that go into it being very good swimmers. Swimming tends to be the least important kind of the three. It's always the shortest. What they say is you can always, you can't win the race on the swim, but you can definitely lose it because it is so short. I always had the advantage that coming in as a collegiate swimmer, it was what I was actually best at. I was always kind of in that front group out of the water, which made it really fun because, when people cheer for you, so my family would always come, the only place you really get to see people when they're racing is in the transitions. So you really only see who you're going to go watch race when they come out of the swim or when they get back from the bike or the finish line, because then they're off kind of doing their thing. So it was always really fun to be part of that first group out of the water. But because I was a good swimmer, because that was my strongest of the three, that race, that year's nationals, played very much in my favor because the swim was so tough, because it was so choppy and so windy, that anyone that wasn't a really strong swimmer, like really, really struggled. They really kind of, got hit back by the current. I remember people weren't making the buoys. Like, it took them a lot to get, around the buoys. So the swim course will always be lined by buoys. And like, usually you have to keep it to the left or to the right, depending on which way you're swimming. And I remember like I was struggling with the swim. And at the time, I was like, man, this is going to be a rough race because I'm struggling. But I didn't think about the fact that, hey, if I'm struggling as a really good swimmer, everyone else is probably struggling that much more. So all that to be said, I ended up having a really good race, not even from like the time I put up, but from my placing, because so many people struggled on the swim and then ended up struggling on the bike as well. So I was always a good swimmer. I was like a so-so cyclist. And I was at the time like a really bad runner. My races were always like, I would come out in the first group on the swim. There's a picture of me on the swim team. Geez, that's old school. But I always come out like first group on the swim. On the bike, I'd get passed by like a small handful of people, but on the run, like everyone that did pass me on the run. So that race ended up playing in my favor, and I ended up qualifying without really expecting it to go to Age Group Worlds, which was in London that year. The cool thing about that was that was also the year of the Olympics. So we did the triathlon course for that same distance, the same distance they do in the Olympics. We did it in the same course. So around Hyde Park in London, it was such a cool experience. Like, I had the full on Team USA kit with my last name on it. Something that like I'll never forget. So super, super fun experience. I traveled alone. I was just telling producer Liz, before we hit record, because she was asking me for any reference pictures from the race. And the unfortunate thing was, because I, went on that trip alone and I was young, it was like a great experience, but like terrible about taking pictures. Like, I have 0 pictures of that trip aside from the race picture that the race took of me on the bike, which kind of sucks because, they had like an opening ceremony. There was a whole team there. So you travel with all the age group Team USA people. So from the youngest age groups, which I was a part of, to like, the much older athletes representing Team USA in the race. So it was a super cool event. I remember, a lot of things about the trip was funny because there was like the first half of the trip and the second half of the trip. The first half of the trip, I traveled with Team USA. I stayed in like the Team USA hotel, which was a beautiful hotel right across from Hyde Park in London, which, if anyone's been to London, it's like a really, really nice area in London. So the hotel was beautiful, had like a really nice view. That's where the entire team was staying. But then for the second half, since I traveled all the way to London, I ended up staying for, I think, 10 extra days. But at that point, I was staying on my dime. So I ended up staying in a hostel, which, if anyone's ever done like the hostel thing in Europe, it is insane. But like, at the time, I was 23? Man, I was 22 at the time. So like, it's what they say. Like, when you're in your 20s, like, it's a time to go backpack around Europe, like, get those experiences. And I stayed at this hostel where I remember it was 1 room, 8 beds. It was 4 bunk bed sets where you would stay in the bunk bed, and the bottom drawer of the bunk bed came with a lock, and you would just put your stuff in there. It was a shared bathroom for all those people, co-ed. It was the cheapest, place you could stay, obviously. So it was always funny remembering, because the first half was like, such a like nice trip, nice hotel. Like, we were eating at nice restaurants. You were with Team USA. They had like, people that like would give you massages and stuff in the hotel, body work people. So pampered. And then once I stayed on my own dime, I went a couple minutes into London and stayed at this hostel, which was, in a completely different way, an awesome experience. I remember I ended up being really good friends, making really good friends with these guys from Spain, because I spoke Spanish. So we like bonded over the language. A lot of the people that stayed in the hostel were people from all over Europe that were traveling to London to learn and get better at English. So there was like some people from Italy, there was like some people from Spain, there were some people from, just these other countries that were spending some time in London to try and like get a job or just, get better at English. So it was a really cool experience. ended up being really fun too, because I ended up doing a lot of the not touristy things in London, because we would just go out with the people that were spending 3-6 months at the hostel and were like working, kind of immersed in being in the city. And we would go out to these places that, you know, I probably would not have gone if I would have just done like the touristy stuff. So really fun trip. Crazy to think that it's been almost 10 years ago, but that is the answer to the quote unquote Team USA days. It's funny because now, people see the pictures of me in like the Team USA kit and stuff, and like they think it's like, you know, Olympics or something super crazy. And by no means is it not. Was it a big deal that I qualified? Like, yeah, it was a big deal. But, you know, if you're familiar with the endurance world, it's definitely like many levels below anything super crazy. But it's still, it was an awesome experience. I still have that uniform. My intention's always been to like frame it up, and I just haven't gotten to it. I tried it on the other day and it still does fit. Mind you, it fits me a lot differently. That's the other crazy thing too. So if you look at that picture of me on that bike, I am a $150 in that picture. So 150 pounds. Now I'm like 170. So 20-pound difference. And the interesting thing too, because I'm trying to get back into this endurance stuff now, is I'm not really that much slower. I don't think I'm slower at all, actually. I think I'm running faster than I was back then, and 20 pounds heavier, which, you know, is a testament to just training consistently. I think it's also a testament to like the evolution of the athlete in general. I think the one thing that's become very apparent now with like the rise of the quote unquote hybrid athlete, because back then, you know, back when I was doing this stuff, it was like, you're either an endurance athlete or you're trying to get big and strong. Like both worlds, by no means do they exist in the same stratosphere. You're either lifting weights or you're getting good at like running and cycling. You cannot do both. If you're doing one, it's at the detriment of the other. And I really appreciate the fact that that's been like completely, obviously squashed and, you know, has been very much proven to not be the fact. So it's cool to now be a living example of that, because, you know, I'm getting back into the sport. I actually just signed up for a half Ironman, in October. I'm going to be doing the half Ironman here in Waco. It's a longer distance than I used to do in the sport, and I'm super excited to do it. I think that I can, you know, have maybe the same amount of success in the sport, if not a little bit more. So I'm excited to get back into it. I did that relay with my friends. I've talked about it on the podcast, where I did the bike length of the half Ironman and just got bit by the bug again. I was like, this is so much fun. So excited to get back into it. And again, excited to get back into it and continue to train with Flex, with the program that I write for the Train Hard app, and not have to sacrifice one goal for the other, because again, I really don't think you need to do that now. So excited, and I'll keep you guys updated here on the podcast, but that's the Team USA story. I know that it's a question we've gotten a couple times, and it came in when we put the question sticker. Let's see what else we got here. Steelman an argument against CrossFit. That's a good one. So, and I don't even think I have to like steelman it so much, because I think that a lot of this is like been proven to be pretty valid. I think that if I were to make the argument, quote unquote, against CrossFit, the first thing you have to do is like define what CrossFit is. And in my opinion, I think that that's gotten tougher and tougher as like CrossFit has become everything. And what I mean by that is, now, if you're just doing a workout and it involves a barbell and a rig, people will see that and they will like call it CrossFit, right? Like if you're doing something in, you know, the vicinity of rogue equipment, people will say that that's CrossFit. And I think that like, that's what makes it a little bit tough to have these conversations, because there doesn't seem to be any more like a very, you know, concrete definition of like what CrossFit, the training methodology is, which is interesting, right? Because the whole way that CrossFit like kind of came to be was the fact that like, you know, we now have these very strict definitions for what fitness is and for, you know, what all of these things. And it's, you know, high intensity functional movements performed at, I can't remember the definition, but the irony here is that CrossFit was all about defining these things. And I think that now a lot of this stuff has kind of gone into this gray area, which is what makes it tough to have these kind of conversations about like, what's the steelman argument against CrossFit? I think that the CrossFit Games has also played a big role in that because, you know, for a lot of people, their only knowledge of what CrossFit is the games and kind of what they've seen in the competition space. But as the CrossFit Games have evolved, you've seen everything from swimming to pegboards to obstacle courses to long runs to long bike rides. So I think that like in that respect too, like quote unquote, what CrossFit is has just become so wide that it's tough to make an argument for or against because you can't really do any type of training anymore that people can't some way say is CrossFit. So anyway, with all that in mind, I think that CrossFit by definition is, you know, there's a lot of variety in that training. I think it's very, very focused on like the 9, you know, core functional movements that they teach in the level 1. I think that, you know, high complexity movements play a big role in it. I think that those are kind of the things that, at least in my mind, differentiate what is like CrossFit and what it was intended to be, to any type of training now. And I think that if you were to make a steelman argument against it, is that I don't necessarily think that that level of complexity is as beneficial as any of us that came from CrossFit in the early days thought it was beneficial in the beginning. So I was fully bought in the beginning that everyone learning how to squat snatch and eventually learning how to walk on their hands or learning how to do a ring muscle up was so important to, you know, them getting their goals. And there's just so much good wrapped into learning new skills. And I get that. But I think the steelman argument against that is that for the average person, the amount of repetition and the amount of skill that they need to learn to accomplish those goals, I think just takes up so much time and the opportunity cost is too high to what they can get from just doing very basic movements and doing it with enough repetition and progressive overload to get all the big bang benefits that you want from a workout program, like building muscle, increasing conditioning, even increasing mobility, getting stronger. All of the things that I think most people want from exercise, you can accomplish quicker if you're not spending time trying to like, you know, dial in how to transfer on the rings so you can get your first muscle up. Now, is there value in learning a skill like a muscle up if you have the prerequisite strength? Of course. But it's just people don't have enough time. Like people don't have enough time to go to class and be with a coach enough to like make significant progress in those movements to get the benefit of it. And I think that also there's like a very, very like well understood now risk reward ratio of some of these movements that for, not for everyone, but for the average like 35, 40-year-old guy just like isn't there, you know, like say what you want, but if you just can't get into a good overhead position, like should you be doing squat therapy every single day you get in to like improve it and eventually be able to get an overhead squat? Maybe, but I would argue like just back squat, just sandbag squat. Heck, just go to a LA Fitness and get on a hack squat machine because it's stable and you don't have to worry about any of that stuff and get a good heavy stimulus. Like I think that the unfortunate part about CrossFit becoming, you know, so popular was that many people got closed-minded to the value of all other training methodologies and training tools, right? Like all of a sudden it's, if you're not performing a squat to full depth and standing all the way up, it's not a squat. All of a sudden, like if you're using machines or using pulley machines, like that's not functional. So, you know, you're wasting your time. And all that just is so silly. Like if you say it out loud, it's so incredibly silly to think that way. And again, I was bought in hook, line, and sinker. I was like, hey, if you're not doing CrossFit, if you're not trying to learn big skills, oh, look at that old school overhead squat. Man, I would break if I was doing that now. Liz pulled up a video of me. What am I overhead squatting here? 18 and 14 reps at 175 pounds. Look at that with the narrow grip. Man, my arms don't even straighten like that anymore. Anyway, man, oh, to be young. But like I was saying, it's just kind of one of those things where, like, for me back then in my 20s, like the risk reward to doing that, putting my body weight overhead and squatting for max sets made sense. It was like a good movement, taxed me in the right ways. I was progressing. I wasn't in pain. But, like you just get to a point where I think that, like, now using a safety bar, nothing wrong with that. Using like I said, a leg press machine, if you have access to that, nothing wrong with that. I think that as long as people are realistic and honest about their goals in the gym, there are just so many other ways to get there. And I think that for anyone that came from the CrossFit space and just genuinely is still stuck in this belief that it's like high intensity CrossFit functional movements or you're wasting your time, I think that that's silly. So really roundabout way of answering the question. But if I were to boil it down, my steelman argument against CrossFit is that I think that depending on where you're at in your training age and depending on where you're at just, in life and limitations, and especially limitations with like how much time you have, I just don't think it's as, bang for your buck as it can be than doing things that are a lot more basic and a lot less complex. To me, CrossFit boils down to like, always wanting to get the more complex skill. And I don't think that that's necessarily the right way to go. So anyway, that's my 2 cents as, someone that's been in the space for a while. And as I think gone through the evolution that I've seen a lot of people go in, which is, got into CrossFit, sipped on the Kool-Aid, loved it, got super in love with it, went super hard, and then just got to a point where like the time I have available to training and my goals just means that it doesn't make sense for me anymore. And now I really enjoy, and, I'll roll this right into another question that we got, which is, what's my training regimen? My training regimen now is I do Flex from the Train Hard app, which is essentially a very, very down to the basics hypertrophy, so bodybuilding program. I do that 3 times a week. And then I'm working with a coach specifically on this half Ironman prep. So doing like very specific endurance training on the bike and on the run. And I'm going to start swimming again as well. I'm doing that like, 4, 5 times a week. So it's definitely a lot of training, which I would preface with, you don't need to do that much training to accomplish any goals. One thing that went out I sent out an email recently is that I think that for most people, for most men out there, and I think that this probably encapsulates who our audience is more or less. I think most men in their 30s, 40s, 50s that have other shit going on than just, going to the gym and training and reaching goals. So you have a job, you have a family, you have responsibilities. So you're limited on the time that you can spend on training. I think that for that person, and also your goal isn't, to qualify for the CrossFit Games. Your goal isn't anything like super specific performance wise. You're also, from an aesthetic point of view, probably not training to get up on stage and compete in a bodybuilding show. I think that most guys, 30s, 40s, 50s, with other shit going on, generally just want to feel good and look better. You want the shirt to fit a little bit better. You want to go to the beach during the summer, take your shirt off, and people notice that you work out. You want to feel confident in how you look without a shirt on. That doesn't mean you have to be super, super lean, but you do want a certain aesthetic that you're just proud of. I think that that is what I would boil down our audiences, most people listening, and their goals. And for that, I think that 3 to 4 times a week of a good hypertrophy program, obviously I'm biased, but I think Flex fits the note 100%, and a little bit of conditioning, which I do add to Flex. So I like having a little bit of conditioning in Flex, the program I write for Train Hard, because if you're doing this and this alone, you still have to hit the conditioning every now and then. It's very, very important. Now, I don't necessarily do the conditioning that's in Flex because I'm doing all this endurance training because I have a very specific endurance goal that I'm going after. And again, I think that if you are someone that's like, hey, I want to sign up for a half Ironman, a half marathon, a 10K, a high rocks race, you should be doing something that's going to prepare you for that race and do a good job preparing you for that race. But taking a step back, if you're literally just like, hey, I just want to look good and feel a little bit better, I don't think it gets any better than like good old fashioned hypertrophy training, like tempo, start with a more compound type of lift, then go into more like isolated accessory movements. That's the way I structure flex. You'll start the session with something like a bench press, something like a squat, something that's a little bit more compound. And then as your CNS gets taxed, your central nervous system gets a little taxed, we'll move into more, isolated movements. So something specific for the chest, specific for the arms, so on and so forth. Again, stuff that is like very, very basic and has been working for years and years and years. I have right here next to my desk, anyone watching the video, you can kind of see Arnold Schwarzenegger's, the new Encyclopedia of Modern Bodylifting. I mean, there is just so much stuff when it comes to fitness in general that we have overcomplicated over these past few decades that honestly, if you go back to the basics, like the basics work and they work so well. It's just sometimes they're like a little bit boring. Like, all right, 3 times a week, progressive overload, like do that for 4 to 6 weeks and then kind of like swap the movements a little bit, do it again. That doesn't seem exciting. Like that doesn't seem like enough, but I am telling you, it 100% works. So if I didn't have the specific endurance goal, I think that right now I would honestly train 3 to 4 times a week, do that super hard. But again, the reason that I'm layering the endurance work on top of that is because, and we've talked about this on the podcast, like I'm just someone that like needs an athletic goal to shoot for. That was the marathon prior, but my body doesn't seem to be enjoying that distance. I just can't build in a training block to the point I need to for that much running without getting injured. So that's the reason for my pivot to the half Ironman distance. Again, I got bit by the bug when I did the race with my buddies, but also it seems like a better idea from like a purely like impact on the body, just because I can do a lot of the training in the pool and on the bike, which are very low impact. And then for the run itself, I'm basically just training for a half marathon, which is half of the distance that I was training on before. So I want to see if doing a little bit less running is easier on the body. But that's my training regimen right now. And the person that asked that question, said, they were asking about my training regimen because they're trying to be jacked like Gabe. First of all, thank you for the compliment. I feel like sometimes I still think that I got ways to go to look the way I want to look, but I really appreciate the compliment. But on that note, like if that's your goal, is your goal just to build muscle and look lean and improve your body composition, you don't need to do a whole lot. 3 to 4 times a week. Reminds me, I sent out an email newsletter 2 weeks ago and I got over 30 responses where if you give me a little bit of context about kind of like your injury history, your specific goals, I'll give you exactly which days in the current Flex cycle on the Train Hard app to do so that you can get the results that you want to get. Because Flex right now in the app is 5 days a week of training. And like I said, I'm not doing all 5 days. I'm doing 3 days a week, because the 5 days would be too much volume with all the endurance stuff that I'm doing. And because honestly, I believe that like you can get 90-80% of the results with just 3 times a week of training. Can you get, if you're just doing hypertrophy training, is it better to go all 5 days? Of course. But the point I'm trying to make here is that you get diminishing returns with every extra day of training that you're doing. Mike Israetel does a great job describing this, but essentially what I mean is if you were to train 1 day a week, you could still get results. Like if you went 1 day a week, trained really hard, went to failure, you could absolutely, with the right nutrition, build muscle, burn fat, and improve your body composition. Now it would happen slowly, but you could do it. If you turned 1 day of training a week to 2 days of training a week, you would significantly increase the speed at which you got those results, the effectiveness of your training program. Like you go 1 to 2 days of training and you are getting a lot more bang for your buck. You go 2 to 3, now you're getting a little bit more bang for your buck, but you're still getting a lot more bang for your buck. Now this is where it gets interesting. Where you go 3 to 4 or 4 to 5, the amount of additional benefit that you get starts getting smaller and smaller. And then when you go from like 5 to 6, it's almost insignificant. And when you go from 6 to 7, you might not even be getting any improvements. You might actually it might be counterproductive now, because now you're not getting any rest. You're never getting any recovery. So when you look at it that way, that I think is the most powerful, impactful way, for me at least, to think about why, 3 days or 4 days of week, or even 2 days, if you're just like completely slammed and you don't have the time, it's a really good way to see why that would actually be a good way for you to go about this. Because when we don't have the time to go out there and do 4 sessions a week, 5 sessions a week, you're a new dad, starting a new job, you just moved, you're just getting the late, like whatever season of life that you're in that just doesn't give you a lot of flexibility or a lot of time. I know that for a lot of guys, the toughest part is thinking that like, well, I can't commit to going 5 days a week. So like, what's the point? And then that is the worst thing that can happen, because you can actually get, like I said before, 80, 90% of the way there with 3 quality sessions a week, 4 quality sessions. I mean, I think you're almost 100% of the way there. So really long-winded way of saying that, my training regimen now 3 times a week, I think for most people 3 to 4 times a week works really well. And if you have any questions on how you can do that with the current flex cycle in the app, and I haven't gotten back to, well, I've gotten back to everyone, but you can email me anytime, info@th.fit. And I'm happy to kind of, give you a little bit of advice there, because I think it is totally doable. And I think it's actually the way to go for anyone out there that's super busy and is stressing or like sacrificing from other areas of their life to get to the gym 4 or 5 times a week because they really want those results. You can get so much time back, and I think still get where you want to get to. So same guy asked, because Jonathan was the one that recommended Kuru shoes. I did end up getting them. I do like them. It's tough to ever say like, hey, that's the thing that's making me feel better. But just a little bit of background here. When I first shared that I was dealing with this plantar fasciitis on my foot, like I said, my body just isn't doing well with all this running volume. Someone in the Train Hard community tab, which by the way is one of the many reasons that you should be on the Train Hard app. The community tab is awesome. Constantly holding you accountable, constantly people answering questions, providing tips. This was one of them. So Jonathan replied and said that these Kuru shoes are great for plantar fasciitis and that they'd be really helpful. So I ended up buying those for our trip to Ecuador, since I knew we were going to be on our feet a lot. And I like them. They're super comfortable. Like I said, it's always tough to say, hey, since I got those shoes, it's gotten a lot better. Because at the same time, I also like really brought down the running volume. I did the BPC 157. I know we've shared this on the podcast, went the peptide route to try and get the plantar fasciitis under control. So I did a bunch of things. So it's always tough to say, hey, that one thing was super helpful. But I will say the shoes are comfortable and I think they help. And I still use them. They're like my daily wear shoes. So I'm hoping that keeps my foot healthy as I start building again with this half Ironman goal. But thank you for the recommendation. And yes, I did take it. I do have them and I enjoy, I think they're super comfortable. What is one thing you have changed your mind on over the last 6 months, year, and 5 years? It's funny, right? Because Jason thinks I'm super closed-minded and don't change my mind about everything. I don't think that's true at all. Over the last, let's start with 5 years. So 5 years ago, 2020. I mean, I've changed my mind about everything from 2020. Changed my mind about a lot of things. I'm sure it did for a lot of people listening as well. We won't get super controversial on that stuff, but I recently got a Facebook memory, and I think that it was right before 2020. My wife and I think we weren't married yet. We were always big on self-experimentation. So we actually went vegan for a little while. And, at the time, this kind of stemmed into when I was like super into all things food quality. And I thought like food quality was the end all be all of everything, energy levels, body composition, feeling good, like all of those things. Like I was the most strict about like no seed oils in absolutely anything that we touched. I was the guy that wasn't having any artificial sweeteners. Everything was like super organic, whole foods only. I mean, in large part, that was a big reason we ended up living where we live. We ended up moving to Texas and, on 12 acres of land, because at the time we were 100% in this camp of, we want to grow every bit of food that our family's going to have access to. We had planned, we were going to have eggs from our chickens. We were going to raise pigs for pork. We were going to raise cows for meat. We were milking cows, and that was the raw milk that we drank, and we made cheese. And it was like, we were full on, like, if it's not something that we're seeing go from like, growing it to on our table, it is going to kill us. Like that was to the level that we were like, food quality snobs, which is what I call that train of thought now. And I don't mean that to offend anyone, but that's what we were at the time. We were like 100% food quality snobs. Like, hey, if we're not going to a restaurant that doesn't, use beef tallow to like cook all their food, and everything's like farm to table and blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. And man, like I wouldn't say completely changed my tune on that, because I 100%, and I know that me and MDV have gone back and forth about this a bunch, but food quality 100% matters. It 100% matters. But what does that mean? What does it mean that food quality matters? I mean, that means that the majority of your diet should come from whole foods. That means that obviously the nutrient quantity in a vegetable and a fruit and a piece of meat and something that doesn't have a long ingredient list is going to be higher than box mac and cheese or Pop-Tarts or so many of these like super, artificial foods. Obviously those foods are better. But that being said, I think that, and a lot of this was a result of the fact that at the time, like, we didn't have kids. We were both working. I mean, financially is a concern too. Like we had two incomes and really like no big, huge expenses, because at the time we hadn't even bought the house yet. Like so much of this, my shift in this was out of necessity, because now we have kids. Now we have a mortgage. Now we have, I work and Ariel's a stay-at-home mom. Like so many of the things that I believed were like 100% important from a nutrition perspective, I was immediately like forced to change my mind on once, like, I say like, we got thrown into like what the real world is, which is having kids, trying to make finances work, like also just trying to like find out like what's worth stressing about and what isn't worth stressing about. Like once we became parents and like got like thrown into the deep end of like being adults, all of a sudden, like looking line for line on the ingredient list of like, does this thing have a shred of like palm oil? Otherwise it's going to kill me. Just like it went so low in the list of priorities for us that we just changed our mind on like how crazy we have to be about that stuff, and made us double down on the basics, which is, okay, are we making smart food decisions the majority of the time? Is the amount that we're eating conducive to our goals, whether it's performance at the time or aesthetics at the time? That's why I think counting macros is such a powerful tool. And we just like decided to like let all the other stuff go, because I have plenty to stress about now that I don't need to be stressing about, like, what I'm going to eat if we go to a baseball game, and am I going to bring my own snacks, or are we going to stop on the Whole Foods on the way there? Or am I just going to have like some popcorn and a churro and some lemonade and like not care because I have that stuff once in a blue moon and the dose makes the poison? So I would say that the biggest change for me, if you look about, 5 years back, has been just like my view on nutrition, the things that matter, and, how important food quality is. It's funny. I just saw Alec Blennis, who I really appreciate, puts out a lot of really good content. We've had him on the podcast as a guest, really smart guy. He had a clip that went viral, from a podcast, with actually another, podcast guest that we've had, Jordan Sayat, had him on the podcast. I actually want to go listen to that episode, because those two guys, I really appreciate a lot of the stuff that they put out. But this clip went viral where Alec Blennis is like, if you're in your 20s and you're worried about food dyes and you can't run a 6-minute mile, you need to shut the fuck up. That's exactly what he said, word for word. And while, 6-minute mile, fast, pretty aggressive goal. I mean, Jason filmed a YouTube video about trying to get a 6-minute mile. That's by no means a slow time on the minute. I think that a slow time on the mile the sentiment behind that is something I 100% agree with. And that's been the biggest thing I've changed my mind on, is like, if you're like super concerned that like, this thing that you're eating or drink mix has like, a food dye that has been shown to like maybe cause something if you, have it in these huge, high concentrations. Like if you're super worried about that, but you're not training hard and you're not like a fit individual and you're not worried about the basics, like you're kind of majoring in the minors. And, he caught a little bit of heat because, 6-minute mile is pretty fast, but he backed it up saying that like, if you're in your 20s, you should be working on your fitness. Like this is the time for you to be as capable and as fit as possible. And if you're not doing that and you're worried about all these other little things, you're kind of just using it as an excuse to not work on the basics that, take more work. They take, more time. So anyway, definitely go check out that podcast. But I saw that recently that like, just popped up on my feed yesterday. And I generally agree with the sentiment. There's, a lot bigger movers when it comes to your health, longevity, performance, aesthetics than, these little things that have become a huge deal when it comes to like ingredients and additives and artificial things. And again, I'm not saying that stuff doesn't matter. I just don't think it matters as much as the basics, which is how much are you eating? What do your macros look like? Are you getting enough protein? Is the majority of your food coming from whole food sources? What's your relationship with stuff like alcohol look like? Really big deal. Basically everything that we outline in our Train Hard 5 nutrition protocol, like the whole reason that I wrote that nutrition protocol was because the basics matter. And I think that if you're going to really focus your time and attention, which is limited for the average guy listening to this, on improving your nutrition, you shouldn't waste any of it on these like little things that may or may not move the needle. You should focus on the basics. So that is long-winded way of explaining what I've changed my mind on the 5 years. I know that turned into like a whole nutrition rant, but I'm glad you asked the question because that is definitely something I feel very, very passionate about. Something I've changed my mind on over the past year now, man. So looking back at summer of last year, I think that the biggest thing there is definitely to do with our 2 kids. So if I think about summer of last year, Charlie, our second, would be just a couple months old. And at the time, we were like in the throes of a pretty big adjustment phase. We've always said, and I've said this on the podcast, I know the clip was making the rounds, but I want a big family, and I've always wanted a big family. I've always wanted a lot of kids. It's kind of a running joke. My mom makes fun of me. She's like, yeah, just wait for each one. But Ariel's on the same page. Like we both, have said we want like 4 kids. Now the running joke is like 4 to 6. But I want a big family. And when we had Shay, our first, we were very fortunate, very blessed that, Ariel did not have a tough pregnancy. She didn't have a tough, postpartum period. I think a lot of that is a testament to like how good she was about all things, her nutrition, taking care of herself, proper rest, giving herself proper time, all things that, I'll give a plug here. She really helps women with now. So if you are listening and you're a woman, or, you're a guy and you have a spouse who's either about to give birth or recently postpartum, definitely follow my wife, Ariel Bloom, on Instagram. That's the stuff that she loves putting out, and really loves helping women on kind of that journey specifically with fitness and nutrition. But, she really puts so much work into like learning all the things and then implementing them so that those periods were, as easy as they could be for her. I know that the preparation is just a part of it. I know another part of it is like, we have been very lucky. I know a lot of women that do all the right things. Ariel has a lot of friends that do all the right things, nutrition, fitness, like everything to be prepared for pregnancy and postpartum. And it ends up being really tough. So by no means am I saying that like, if you had a tough pregnancy or a tough postpartum, it's just because you didn't prepare. I know that Ariel's preparation was a part of it, but another part of it is we got very, very lucky, and we're very, very grateful for that. But because, that period wasn't maybe as tough as we had expected, we had our second kid, Charlie, and it wasn't a surprise. We were like, we're ready for another one because we want to have a big family. So, why waste any time? we had Charlie pretty soon after Shay. So they're 17 months apart. So Ariel was pregnant, Shay was 8 months old and Ariel was pregnant again. And we were doing the whole thing over again. So last year around this time, with Charlie being a couple months old, we were in the middle of adjusting from just having one kid to having two. And I mentioned it on the podcast many times, I'm very honest about this. It was really, really tough. It was really tough on me and Ariel. I think that as much as going from 0 to 1 was maybe easier than we expected, going from 1 to 2 was like so much harder than we expected. There were a lot of dynamics to that. There was, just Ariel having to manage like letting go of Shay, our first, a little bit so that I can really take care of him so she can take care of Charlie. There was, us probably not doing as good of a job communicating with like the different needs that we had at that point. It was a lot. And I think that at the time, I, for a little bit was like, whoa, maybe this whole big family thing is something that I underestimated. Maybe, this is the joke that I would make at the time is like, yeah, like, still want a big family, but I completely get why people stop at 2. Like, it just makes so much sense now. Like, this is a lot. And even the idea of having another kid or having like, more than just one more kid was very, very overwhelming, for both of us. And I think we both at the time were like, we're not ready for any of that. And, maybe this is just kind of one of those things where like with time, you like forget about the hard stuff. But I think that something I've changed my mind about, from a year ago is, and I mentioned this on another episode, is I do think that as much as having a kid completely knocks you on your heels and is one of the hardest things that you will do, and you can't prepare for it no matter how many podcasts and books you listen to or how much anything you do, you just won't be prepared because it's going to be a unique personality. It's going to have unique challenges. You don't know what you don't know. There's just so many reasons. You just can't be ready. I do think that it's one of the most powerful ways to like just figure it out and level up and become such a better, more capable mother or father. And, you kind of like come out of the other side so much better for it. And then they just like bring you so much joy. So at least personally, that's how like my thought around all of that has evolved. And, all to say that we're 100% back to, we want a big family and we're definitely going to have more kids. And maybe that is just like the fact that there's been enough time separating us from that adjustment period that we just kind of forgot about how hard it is and we're being naive to it. But I do genuinely believe now, having gone through that very tough adjustment period, that you get out from the other side of that just so much stronger, so much better. Like our marriage is so much stronger. We communicate so much better. Like we were so much more on the same page because we got through that, and it was tough and there were some tough conversations and there were some tough moments. But now we're just like, I think just so in lockstep with like being able to continue to grow our family. So that's super exciting. And again, the other thing that we learned from all that was that I think spacing them apart like a little bit more is a good idea. I think that, Charlie and Shay were very close together. And I think that that's part of what made that as challenging as it was. Man, anyone that's had twins at any point, whether it's like you went from 0 to 2, or I can't even imagine going from 1 to 3. I can't imagine going from 2. Anyway, anyone that's had twins, like hats off. But again, I think it just proves my point that, there's people out there that have had twins and like, they're fine. Like you can do it. Like, it's just, it makes you figure out how much time you're wasting, how much energy you're wasting, how much like inefficient you're being with like everything, because for your kids, you will do everything and anything. So you get better. You like figure out how to do it with less sleep, less energy, less time. And once you get through like that hard rip the Band-Aid off period, you like look back and you're like, man, like I am so much more capable than I gave myself credit for. One example that I've given before is the whole like flying with one kid now. When we flew, because we've always traveled a lot. We traveled a lot with Shay. We've traveled a lot with both of them. And now we've even taken 2 trips where we've only traveled with Charlie, our second. when we traveled with Shay, it was so overwhelming. It was like overwhelming. Like, you gotta like, what if he like have to change the diaper on the plane? What if he cries? You don't want to be that person. Like all the things, right? That are stereotypical about flying with kids. It's stressful. It's tough going through security. You have to like check in all the packet, all the, the kid seat and the stroller. Then you have to like haul it over to oversized baggage. It's a production. Then we traveled with two. Obviously, that much more of a production, that much tougher. I mean, I've had some of my toughest flights because we've traveled with two. We had to sit on the tarmac for 2 hours in Austin once without the AC. Shay's like crying because he's so hot, like he's sweating, he's sitting. And that time we flew, we didn't even buy him a seat. So they were both lap infants. Not a good idea. Do not recommend. But now, like we've gone through that, and now we'll take a trip with just Charlie. So we're back to flying with one. And it's like the easiest thing on the planet. And it's the easiest thing because you learn all the lessons. You also have a different perspective now. Like now you're prepared for the chaos of traveling with two kids. So you go back to traveling with one and you're like, man, this is so easy. And I just think that that's like such a real life example and analogy of just how much more capable you become with another kid, or any challenge in life for that matter. I know that we have a lot of dads that listen, but if you're not a dad or not a dad yet, like I think this applies for anything that's like an incredibly challenging part of your life. Like you get through it and you're so much better for it on the other side. And then you look back and you're like, man, that situation that I thought was so impossible and stressful to deal with before, like it's so easy now because like you leveled up. So biggest thing I changed my mind up over the past year, I think, is that like, we are 100% capable and able to have this big family that we've always dreamed of. And that's something that I think at this point last year, I was very on the fence about. So obviously I'll keep you guys updated on that. Definitely not in a rush quite yet for baby 3. We're giving ourselves some time, but the plan is still to have a big family. And I'm sure that that'll be an adjustment that will learn all sorts of new lessons. And I love sharing that with Jason on the podcast. So I'm sure it'll come up. Over the last 6 months, that's a little tougher. I don't know that I've changed my mind on anything super crazy over the last 6 months, but I think we did plenty with the 5 years over a year. So let's see what else we got here. As far as questions go, favorite books. When is Gabe going to start BJJ? It's a good question. And I don't know. I do think that it's one of those things where personality wise, I struggle with getting into something and not like fully committing to it. And I know that this is just a personality difference. And for some people, them starting, whether it's running or Brazilian jiu-jitsu or just any sort of like extracurricular activity to train for, they could be 100% okay. And some people actually prefer to do it and just kind of like take their time with it and not fully immerse themselves to it, just do it as much as they can. But I'm just not that type of person. I really struggle with that. So for me, and I know it shouldn't be this way. And I know that I would probably benefit from, even if I could start now and start with, privates here in our gym once a week and just make it work with the time and energy that I have now. I'm sure that would be incredibly beneficial. I just want to start once I'm ready to like, okay, this is something I'm going to do. This is something I'm going to do. I'm going to go 3 times a week. I'm going to, progress. I'm going to get better. I'm going to, do enough repetition where that learning curve isn't like super, super steep for me in the beginning. So at least that's what I have in my head. I can absolutely make an argument why that's the wrong way to approach this and why it's like, hey, you should just start now. But that's just kind of where I'm at. And I've told myself that, like, for me, the moment where I'll take the dive and where it'll make sense for me to start doing it in with some repetition is when Shay's old enough to start himself, because then it could be an activity where I'm taking him to his class and then I'm either doing class right after, right before. And also just like in terms of logistics and time, it ends up working out a little bit better. So is that an excuse and I'm just kicking the can down the road? Honestly, maybe. Do I see myself doing BJJ in the future? I mean, 1000%. I have so much respect for the discipline, for the sport. Obviously, I've been around it so much through Jason. I think that some of the people that I've met, I know some of the people that I've met through Jason, like his friends, a lot of the guys in the Train Hard Men's Club in Los Gatos, all the guys that do BJJ with him are some of the nicest, most upstanding men that I know, like really inspirational guys. So to me, it's a no-brainer that that's something that I want to, first of all, immerse Shay in. Like the one decision that I'm even more sure about than am I ever going to do it is, am I ever going to expose my son to it? Like 1,000,000%. And I think that that's the time where I'll also find a way to get into it as well. I think that it's also going to be fun for us to both be able to like relate in that journey together. I know that there's something really cool about, like, for example, Jason has been doing it for so long, and, Caden getting into it perhaps is cool in a way where like he's already immersed in it and then he's introducing his son to it. But I think there could be something really cool about like me and Shay kind of like in parallel, being on that journey. So anyway, that's what I tell myself, and that's kind of still the plan. So I'll keep you guys updated on the BJJ journey, but no set date, as of now. What else we got here? If you could do one, this is a fun one to kind of wrap up since I've been talking solo for 56 minutes now. I should have brought a water or something. I don't know how people do solo podcasts that are like longer than an hour, but we're going to get through this here. If you could do one workout with only one of the following, Soto, Lindor, or Alonso, who, why? And this is from our good friend Justin Casas, who loves talking to me about baseball and the Mets. I love it, man. Although they're in a little bit of a rough stretch now, but us Mets fans, we're a sucker for pain. So it wouldn't be a season if they were just killing it the whole season. They have to give us a little bit of heartbreak. So for anyone that doesn't know, Soto, Lindor, and Alonso are probably the three best offensive players on the Mets currently. So if I were to work out with any of them, I think it would be Lindor. And reason being that he's a father of three now. And as much as I would love to talk to him about baseball and the Mets, at least from what I've seen as an outsider, he seems to like really, really enjoy being a dad, and he involves his kids in so much of like what he does. And he's been really outspoken about, a reason he loves playing for the Mets is because the culture they've built has been really kind of like family friendly, family first. So at least from the outside looking in, and again, they say never meet your heroes because what you see from the outside tends to not be what you see in real life. But I'd like to think that, Lindor is a lot of the things that I would like to be as a dad and as a husband. And I think that would be cool to talk to him about, aside from just like, being able to work out with one of my favorite baseball players. So, and he's a ridiculous athlete, and like one of the most seemingly like awesome leaders in that clubhouse. He's a complete class act. So as much as it would be cool to get a workout in with Soto or Alonso, I feel like Alonso would be like a really fun guy to work out with. I feel like he'd be like really silly and shooting the shit the whole time, and probably we'd get some good laughs. But I think I'd really enjoy a 1 hour workout with Lindor, so we can dive into some things about being a dad, being a girl dad, which, man, let me tell you, and I'll end the podcast with this. Who was I speaking to recently? I think it was one of my clients. Yes, it was one of my clients. Because he has a girl, and actually he's now, they're going to be expecting their second, and they don't know if it's a boy or a girl yet, but they're going to find out. But he already has a girl. And what I was sharing with him is, man, we had Shay first, and the amount of love that you feel for your child, boy or girl, is overwhelming. And it's like an emotion that you can't describe, and no one can understand until you're there. Like you think you're like, hey, yeah, but I really love my wife, or I really love, whatever. But man, once you have kids, it's just like a completely different level. It's so overwhelming in a positive way. But at least for me, like the difference in how I feel towards my daughter versus my son, like it's not more love, obviously. It's not, it's so different. It's like just this different level of like wanting to protect and just like never like going, they're just so cute. But man, I joke around all the time that I'm completely screwed with Charlie. She just is going to have me wrapped around her finger. And as much as I'd like to think that, you know, I'll be as tough on her when I need to be, because I have no problem being tough on Shay when I need to be. I think I'm gonna have to rely on Ariel to be that for her, because man, just being a girl dad is a completely different level. I tried braiding her hair this morning and taking a video of it, and that was a nightmare. That did not come out as expected. Maybe I'll share the video anyway, but definitely need to level up my braiding game. I enjoy doing her hair every morning. It's like my favorite part of the morning. But man, yeah, I don't even know how I got on that topic specifically, but I think that does it for all the questions that came in, or at least most of them. Hopefully you guys enjoyed me ranting here for an hour straight. If you did, leave a comment, because I'm sure Jason would like nothing more than to know that I held up my end of the podcast here when he couldn't make it. Maybe he'll let me do some solo ones in the future, because the guy has a crazy travel schedule, and from time to time, he can't make it. So maybe we'll do more of these Gabe solo rants. But I appreciate you guys. It wouldn't be a podcast episode if I don't let you know that if you are not on the Train Hard app. I mean, I've mentioned it in passing a couple times during this episode, but Flex alone, the program that I write, is just so incredibly valuable if you're trying to find something that strips all the noise from training out there, which there is so much noise, takes all the complexity out and just sticks to the basics and guarantees results. You'll have access to that. We obviously have TH Daily, which is a program Jason follows to be like a complete capable badass. Like if you're trying to have something that can help you get better on the mats, if you're a BJJ guy, like you absolutely have to check out TH Daily. There's going to be a new program dropping pretty soon that MDV is spearheading. He's super excited about that. Talking about three times a week of training. That's exactly how that program is going to be structured. And I mentioned this too, the community tab in there is awesome. I mean, the amount of just accountability, support, like if you have a question, we will answer it, of course, but so many times other members of the community will jump in and give really meaningful answers. I mean, it has really become, and it's actually been a pleasant surprise for me, because I didn't think that this would be possible to this extent with, you know, something online in an app, but the community that we built there is incredibly special. So check out the Train Hard app if you haven't already. And again, if you are on the Train Hard app and you need any adjustments to the program, or you want a recommendation on how to follow Flex as a 3-time-a-week program, like I said, I got a ton of replies to that email I sent out. Please just email me info@th.fit. I am on that inbox literally more than I'd like to admit. So please shoot me an email with any questions. Let me know. That's all I got for you guys today. Hour and 2 minutes. I gotta go drink a bottle of water. But I appreciate you guys. Thank you. And we will see you next time.